The plastic tore at my skin as the frozen inhaler gave way. I laid it on a towel to sweat, framed a cheerful cake shot, and stirred cocoa the way a man stirs thoughts. The house was sugar on the surface, and nickel underneath. Someone had traded a birthday for a rehearsal of grief, and handed me the script. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. I am 70 years old, a grandfather, and a retired carpenter. My name is Ezra Whitlow. If you will walk with me, we will look for a hidden threat one small clue at a time, the way an old hand tests a step in a dark stair. Wait, listen, decide. There is a woman in this story who arrived when my house needed a second heartbeat. There is an ending that felt like justice. But first there are the ordinary things that learn to bare their teeth. Before anyone wore suspicion like a coat, there were little stumbles I could have forgiven my own memory. The gas burner left on when I could swear I had turned it off. The carbon monoxide detector blinking in error and then behaving as if it had never met the word. A neat drift of screws on my basement steps, a glitter that almost made me laugh until my heel slid and the laugh turned to an oath I swallowed for my grandchildren's sake. A brake light on my pickup that flickered like a shy witness. My heart pills migrating from the kitchen bowl to the bathroom cabinet, then back again, as if my house had decided to rearrange itself. Do not mistake me for a fretful man. I have carried pressure-treated beams alone at 3 a.m. to beat a storm. I have sat with a dying wife and timed her morphine by the minute hand because grief has its own schedule and will not be hurried. Iris was her name. She loved lavender and lake light. When she died 5 winters ago, I kept the lake house because it held the shape of her kindness in its cedar walls. My daughter, Lena, grew up learning the names of tools and the art of leaving something better than she found it. She married a charming optimist named Colin who was at his best when the spotlight was not on him, and at his worst when it was. They have 2 children, Miles and June, who consider my porch their laboratory and me their very patient assistant. My son, Grant, has a smile that always looks like it was put on in a hurry. He can be funny and thoughtful, but money learns his name faster than he learns its rules, and life has been a series of almosts he resents for not becoming always. A month before the party, I woke at 2 a.m. to a hiss so soft it felt like a suggestion. The pilot light was out. The kitchen was cold in the way danger is always colder than the air around it. I stood in my robe and socks, watching for the twitch of the detector's red eye. Nothing. When I got the pilot relit, I held my hands out to the warmth and realized my fingers were shaking, not from fear but from recognition. Someone had tried a door, found it unlocked, and backed away. Not a burglar. A storyteller rehearsing a first act. The ledger began the next morning. I am a pencil and paper man. Ink is for signatures and love letters. Pencil listens, and it forgives. The notebook lived in a drawer by the stove. I wrote with the patience of someone who knows small things do not stay small if you give them dates and times. I also clipped a cheap microphone under the porch light and propped a thrift store nanny cam in the front window watching the steps. Neither was fancy, but both were good enough to catch a voice that didn't belong. Sunday, 7:10 a.m. Igniter cold, pilot off, no draft in chimney, detector behaves innocent. Monday, 5:30 p.m. Mail flag still raised, envelope with bank emblem missing. Wednesday, 9:45 p.m. Porch motion light trips twice, no raccoon on camera, no neighborhood kids. Friday, Miles's inhaler in freezer behind peas, mouthpiece frosting over. How? Once you write down the same kind of odd 3 times, it stops being odd. It becomes a pattern. And patterns, I have learned, are just confessions with good manners. The same week, I met the woman who respected patterns as if they were people. Her shop on Maple Street was called Tick and Tone, because half of it sold second-hand books and the other half rose and fell with the hearts of old watches, music boxes, radios, and timers that anyone else would have consigned to a shelf labeled, once. She had a river-white streak of hair above her left temple, eyes that warmed slowly like a stove, and a way of touching objects that made you wonder what kind of listening hands could do. Her name was Sylvie Hart. I went in for an out-of-print bird guide and came out with a smile I had not expected to owe anyone ever again. "You look like a man who inventories his days," she said when I set a blank notebook on the counter, and it startled a laugh out of me. "I look like a man who forgets less when he writes," I answered, and she made a little approving sound in her throat, as if I had measured and cut true on the first try. I brought her a kitchen timer the next time, a little metal thing that had timed most of my pies and some of my arguments. It had started stuttering and then quitting like a drunk trying to compliment a hymn. Sylvie took off the back, angled a lamp, and leaned close enough that I could hear her breathe. "Grit," she murmured, "and the hair." She lifted the hair with a brush so fine I could not see the bristles. "Everything has a voice if you let it," she said. "Some things just need you to clear their throat." That was how it began, me bringing her small, stubborn objects, and her giving them back the rhythm of their usefulness. After she returned the timer, I told her about the burner, the screws, the missing mail, the inhaler in the freezer. I told her I hoped I was wrong and was angry that hope had to work this hard. "Someone is counting on you to doubt yourself," she said. "Doubt them instead. Gently. And keep writing as if you were clerk to your own life." The party was for June, 10 years old and newly ferocious about opinions. I brought 2 pies, a pocket knife for ribbon emergencies, and the thawed inhaler that hissed a little when I tested it. I did not mention the freezer. Lena greeted me with the smile of a daughter told by life that she could handle it and then asked to handle more. Colin clapped me on the shoulder with a hand softened by a recent habit of fixing things around their house. He looked proud of it. I forgave him his habit of calling me Z, because he made June and Miles laugh, and because I was not there to count nicknames. Grandfathers do their dances, balloons, chairs, the joke about candles raising the temperature a degree. I watched as I worked. When you watch your own family, you are really watching the story that made you. And if you are careful, you can see where the plot thinks it can get away with something. The first prick, a second inhaler in the cupboard, new and sealed, but when I shook it, it felt oddly light. A faint white dusting surrounded the nozzle like sugar on a bar counter. The second, the door from kitchen to garage had learned to sulk. It did not latch unless you turned the knob hard and lifted as you pushed, the trick carpenters hate because it means someone changed a line by half a millimeter. My hands knew what my eyes tried to ignore. Outside, the children ran circles with sparklers while adults used sentences for guardrails and the children treated them like painting tape, decorative, ignorable. I slipped into the garage when Colin propped the back door. The garage told a story the way rooms do when they know who is in charge. First, the smell. Cinnamon. Not apple pie cinnamon, sharp, insistent, slightly wrong. It lay over the usual notes of oil and old wood the way cheap cologne tries to hide a bad mood. There were too many pomanders, all fresh, not the dried trophies you forget in December, an army meant to bully every other smell out of the room. On a shelf, I found a plastic bin of holiday things, crimped paper bells, jumbled lights, and, unexpectedly, a neat layer of clove-studded oranges wrapped in tissue, which looked almost like some grade school project that had aged into something brittle and proud. I lifted an orange, breathed, and then found the rag beneath. I rubbed it between finger and thumb. The slickness was followed by a fine numbness that made my mouth water in a way I did not like. I dropped the rag, set the orange back, and wiped my fingers on my jeans with the urgency of a man remembering high school shop class warnings. I am not going to be your instruction manual. You know what cloves and cinnamon do to a nose. You know rags do not invent numbness. A garage should smell like washers in coffee tins and the honest ghost of pine, not a holiday alibi. Back inside, I washed my hands twice, soap, then vinegar, because old lessons stick harder than anything, and laughed at a joke I did not hear just to keep the scaffolding from shuddering. Lena lit candles. Colin started a story about a golf tournament I would rather have sanded a doorframe than hear. His teeth were very white. I looked at them and at the rag in my head. That night, I drove home with the windows down. The lake exhaled the day. I set the notebook on the table and wrote the most careful page of my retirement. Garage latch misaligned, half-millimeter lift needed. Second inhaler, light, nozzle dusted. Garage bin, clove and cinnamon masking, rag leaves numbness. Caller ID last night unknown, voice and porch audio at 11:02 p.m. Whispers, soon. The mic was hissy, but the consonants were clean enough to keep. I saved the clip and wrote the timestamp twice. Who in this house knows hinges? Who likes stories about safety? Then I did what Iris would have scolded me not to postpone. I called Sylvie and asked if she ate late. She said she did not, but for me she would pretend. We met at the diner on Oak Road under a buzzing light that made everything look like a stage set that could be struck at any moment. I laid out the facts as if they were tools, smallest to largest, leaving space between them, because truth can suffocate if you pile it. Whose house key do you keep on your ring that you never use? She asked when I was finished. My son's, I said without thinking. Grant's. Has he been by the lake? She said. He borrows tools, I said. He returns them late with gratitude he wants to be paid interest on. He has had a rough year. A partnership that looked like two men arguing with a spreadsheet. Sylvie tipped her head. Obvious men want to be looked at. Subtle men want to be believed. A misaligned latch is not a beginner's mistake. It is the patience of someone who knows how a house breathes. Her words threaded through a memory I had tied up badly. August. Grant and I carrying lengths of cedar. He talked about a friend who could simplify my late life paperwork, a trust, a guardianship, if you ever start leaving the kettle on. He laughed lightly, as if he had not already tried the door. When I got home, I took the key to Grant's apartment off my ring and set it in the dish where Iris used to drop her earrings. The key made a sound too loud for one piece of metal. I slept badly, which is how truth gets your attention when you are old and stubborn, by stealing the softness from your pillow. On Tuesday, I went to the bank and asked a teller who had known me long enough to trust my face to print a list of recurring charges I had not personally set. There was an every other Friday $98 draft to Elder Sure Partners, which advertised nothing except the ability to feel official. I asked for the merchant ID. I asked for the billing address. The printout came like a quiz I had already failed. The merchant ID and callback traced to Suite 402, the kind of address you rent when you want an elevator to vouch for you. The suite number belonged to a building on Riverside where I had once installed reception counters so handsome they made people stand straighter. I sat in my truck and watched the glass doors until a man I trusted to know the guts of a place came out, Hector Alvarez, the building's custodian, a man with honest grease in the creases of his knuckles and a handshake that felt like a door closing correctly. Hector, I called. Mr. Whitlow, he said, breaking into a grin. Is the back still arguing with you? Every morning around 8, I said. Tell me about Suite 402, Elder Sure Partners. He shifted, looked up at the fourth floor like it owed him rent, and then looked back at me. Not a company, really, he said. Mailbox service. You rent the suite number so your papers look like they went to a place with an elevator. Who rents that number? I asked. He gave me the kind of look men give when they are measuring which side of decency a favor sits on. You got my niece an interview when her car died, he said finally. Tenant of record on 402 is a shell called G.W. Lake Consulting. Billing contact, G. Whitlow. The floor of the truck seemed to tip an inch toward the river. G.W. Grant Whitlow. I thanked Hector as if gratitude could settle my stomach and drove straight to Tick and Tone. I set the printout on Sylvie's counter and watched her face as if I could pull courage from the way she read. What else has your son asked you to sign? She asked. 2 months ago he tried to get me excited about a trial guardianship, to keep vultures away, I said. He used words like dignity, simplify, protect, and then laughed as if we were both clever for not believing them. Predators love the language of love, Sylvie said calmly. Let us do this like a case. Gather, compare, set a mirror and not a trap. We worked. We did not touch what would become evidence without clean hands and patience. I swabbed the freezer handle and the suspect inhaler's mouthpiece with cotton and sealed them in little bags. Sylvie did not identify anything that should not exist in a kitchen, she did not turn her shop into a lab for bad ideas. But she could show me whether 2 smears shared a source, whether an oops matched an accident. I took duplicate samples, 1 set sealed for law enforcement, 1 set for my notes, so Sylvie never had to touch what would be logged as evidence. On each bag I printed the date, time, and place, then initialed the seams. I photographed where each swab came from and carried the sealed set straight to the sheriff's desk before anyone else handled it. I made a list of every person with a key to my lake house, Lena and Colin, Grant, Mrs. Pennington, my neighbor who fed the cat when I still had one and kept the extra key because she collected other people's emergencies. I left small invitations, a whisper of graphite on the garage hinge, a slip of clear tape on the pantry jamb, a radio on the garage shelf with an old 2-megapixel camera in its mouth and a memory card tucked into a coffee can of nails. At the same time, I visited a lawyer. Not a man with a marble desk and vague quotations on the wall. A woman named Judith Klein whose office smelled like coffee and file folders, and whose desk bore the dents of someone who had leaned forward for a living. I told her everything. She did not ask me if I was paranoid. She asked for dates, names, and where I kept my will. We built a trust of quiet strength and plain language. The lake house moved into a holding company with a name no one could connect to me unless they knew the 2 trees Iris and I had planted in our first yard. Judith was the successor trustee. No amendment could be made without a doctor's letter from a physician I chose and a second letter from one Judith chose. The only automatic payments allowed were the bills I could read without squinting and feel without blushing. It would not stop a determined thief. It would slow him down until the light got good enough for a photograph. Then the pot of chili arrived. The note was on my kitchen table when I came home from buying screws I did not need. Dad, made your favorite. Heat it up. Do not worry about a thing. The handwriting was Grant's, though he had not boiled water since college. The pot was the one Iris used for soups and winter afternoons you remember like warmth across your shoulders when you come in from shoveling. I did not eat the chili. I set it in the fridge like a bomb I was too young to defuse. I carried it, still cold, to Sylvie at closing time. She opened the lids of her little glass jars and did what a careful person can do without teaching a terrible lesson. "I am not testing for this or that," she said. "I am listening for a neighbor in the bowl that salt does not recognize." She found what neither salt nor memory had invited. It was enough to make my stomach go tight and my anger go very quiet. I carried the pot to the sheriff's office and told Deputy Calder I believed a relative meant me harm. He photographed the pot in my presence, taped the lid, marked it with an evidence number, and logged the time down to the minute. I signed the receipt and slid the carbon copy into the ledger. He took my statement gently, like a man steadying a ladder while a friend changes a bulb he cannot imagine went out on its own. That night, the radio on my garage shelf took 3 photographs. The figure wore a hooded sweatshirt and the posture of someone who had forgotten what it feels like to be young and innocent. He spent a long time looking at my workbench and then crouched by the door, hands working in the place where a latch stops trusting itself. When he turned his head to check the driveway, the hood shifted, and the camera saw the line of his jaw I had seen on a high school stage when he thought applause was owed to him. The image was soft, 2 megapixels and a cheap lens, but the profile was mine to recognize, and the timestamp matched the porch mic whisper at 11:02 p.m. Grant. The next morning, a cheerful voice from ElderShire Partners left a message offering me a capacity evaluation at my convenience to honor your autonomy with a safety plan. I called back. I made an appointment. My voice was the sound men make when they tighten a board to the right pressure and feel the clamp bite. Sunday dinner at the lake would be a family meeting without the posture. I set the table with Iris's mother's china because no one lies comfortably over white porcelain with a rim of blue forget-me-nots. I asked Lena and Colin to bring the kids and a salad. I told Grant I wanted to talk plans, and that I had news he would like. I hired a notary named Ms. Ing for the afternoon. I asked Judith to come by, 4 pi. I asked Sylvie to sit in my bedroom with the door cracked and the recorder on the dresser humming. When they arrived, the house held its breath and then let it out slowly, which is to say it behaved better than we did. We ate roast chicken, potatoes so crisp you could hear them, and salad with too much lemon because I was not thinking about salad. After plates were cleared, I put my hands flat on the table. Miles, who is 8, mirrored me at the kid's end. June, who will prove she is 10 every chance she gets, rolled her eyes at her brother and then mirrored me, too. I smiled and then took it back. I am moving the house into a trust, I said. A professional trustee. I am not for sale, for rent, or for rehearsal. And I am not attending any evaluation paid for through a mailbox rented by a shell called GW Lake Consulting. Lena blinked. Colin sat up as if his spine had just remembered its job. Grant's face changed in ways that made me miss the boy he had been and mourn the man he had chosen to be. "What are you talking about, Dad?" Grant asked, soft, careful, dangerous. "I am talking about ElderShire Partners," I said. "About $98 every other Friday. About Suite 402. About the pot of chili that Deputy Calder is very interested in. About my garage latch that forgot how to be honest. About a second inhaler in Lena's cupboard that felt empty before it was used." Lena stood so fast her chair barked on the floor. "What inhaler?" she demanded. "The new one in your kitchen cupboard," I said. "Who opened it? Who dusted the nozzle? Who put Miles's in the freezer?" I'd weighed it in my palm that afternoon, light in a way medicine never is, and photographed the box seams where clear tape tried to pretend it was factory. Her eyes flew to Colin. He lifted both hands like a man who had learned finally what he could not fix with charm. "Not me," he said. There was no swagger in it. Just surprise, and something like shame for not seeing what love had turned into in the next room. I nodded toward the hallway. Judith stepped into the living room with the confidence of a woman who had seen men try to move walls that were load-bearing. She introduced herself, put the trust on the table, and Ms. Ng set down her stamp. I signed the papers with a hand that did not tremble, and Ms. Ng stamped them with a thunk that sounded exactly like a door closing on hands that did not belong inside. Then I set my phone on the table and pressed play. The garage video showed the figure that was my son bending to teach a latch a bad habit. The audio from 3 nights ago caught a whisper at the front door, soon. The room learned to be silent. Grant tried first. I was trying to protect you, he said. From Colin. From his schemes. I set up the elder sure thing to put a guardrail around you before he talked you into. Colin flinched. Excuse me. Grant kept his eyes on me, which is how men lie to themselves when they cannot bear to look at anyone else. If I had gone through with anything, and I did not, it would have been to keep Dad from being drained by people who see him as an asset. It is a moving story, I said. The trouble is, the rag in the garage, the dust on the inhaler, and the chili you made, are singing the same song in different keys. June whispered, Dad. To Colin because the world had suddenly reorganized itself in her chest. Sit, I said, and my voice did the thing voices do when they remember who they served back when they were young and needed to be listened to. All of you. This is what happens now. I explained the trust. I explained the investigation already underway. I told them Ms. Ng had witnessed documents that would keep my life mine even if anyone tried to rearrange the furniture. I told them Deputy Calder would call with questions to which the only correct answer was the truth. Grant's face worked through grief and calculation and landed on something empty. You would pick a stranger over your own son, he said. I thought of Iris's laugh and the day she told me I could say no to someone I loved and still love them. I thought of Sylvie's fingers briefly on my wrist last week with the calm of a woman who knew how to listen to small machines and old men. I would pick truth over the sweetest lie in the room, I said. Every time. He left without the courtesy of a slammed door. Even then, he understood how much the law respects silence. The weeks after a family earthquake are always slow. Investigators took fingerprints gently from where graphite had told the truth. The bank froze drafts to Eldersure. The capacity evaluation was cancelled with one of those emails that thanks you for your time as if time were their invention. In Grant's apartment, they found a folder with draft petitions for temporary guardianship naming me as the subject, a hand-drawn chart of my medications with red stars next to the ones you do not fool with, and a ledger labeled Phase 2. The numbers written there would not have bought me out of shame, but they might have bought a man out of whatever hole he intended to push me into. Lena swore she had not known about the inhaler. The dust on the nozzle matched residue on gloves found in Grant's trunk. The rag in the garage and the smear on the freezer handle matched each other as rudely as cousins at a reunion. The chili was not soup so much as a story with an unhappy ending cut short. Grant was charged with attempted harm, fraud, and tampering. His lawyer called me. He loves you, she said at one point as if that could count as a plea. He loves parts of me, I said. The parts that sign. He took a deal. He did not look up in the courtroom. I did. I wanted my face to be the last true thing he saw that day. Colin did not run, which surprised me. He stayed and he worked and he came to my house on Sundays carrying groceries with both hands, as if the act might earn him a kind of absolution he did not want but needed. Lena and I learned how to talk again without using apologies as punctuation. She brought Miles and June to the lake. We sanded the porch rail until the cedar dust lay on our wrists like a new kind of jewelry, and in the sanding we said the things we could not have fit into sentences. As for Sylvie, I will give you more than a paragraph because the new love you asked me to carry into this story deserves space. In January, the lake froze into a thin skin that sang if you tapped it with a branch. I slipped on the porch steps like a fool and she laughed, then scolded me, then made me laugh, which undid the scolding and doubled the comfort. In February, she showed me a pocket watch with a cracked crystal and said, "Some breaks you live with and love better." In March, a windstorm uprooted the maple by the boathouse. We cut it into rounds and stacked them, and she listened to the saw the way she listens to a watch, by feeling for the moment the tool wants to be either a friend or a tyrant. We took slow walks along the shore where ice retreated like a lie that had lost its footing. She told me about her first husband, who died of a quiet disease that ate him from inside as if someone had untied all the knots in his rope. I told her about Iris and the way grief had taught me to measure time not by clocks but by chores. We learned the company of each other's silences. In May, we lay on the dock under a sky that had been repaired many times before we were born and which still holds. I took her hand. It felt like permission to admit that even at 70 you can begin again without insulting what came before. I proposed on my porch in August with the lake breathing behind us and a faint smell of cedar pitching a tent in the screen door. I did not kneel. My back would have cursed me, also, there is a dignity to old love that insists on eye level. She said yes like a person choosing a path she had already been walking. We married under a sky that looked like truth laid flat, no show, all blessing. Miles carried the rings in a little wooden box I made from the maple the wind took. June read a poem about murmurations, how starlings turn in the air without one of them being in charge and all of them agreeing anyway. Lena cried without apology. Colin held her hand. Judith Klein came and surprised me by dancing. MS. Ing gave us a toaster with a bow and the kind of smile that says she is paid to witness and would have come anyway. The house stayed mine and became ours. Sylvie brought her books and 3 clocks that had belonged to her grandmother. 2 ran too fast and 1 too slow, and she refused to fix any of them because, she said, it is good to be reminded that time is a suggestion. Sometimes, at night, I pull out the ledger and touch the pages where dates and small indignities lined up to form a verdict. I think of Grant as both the boy who once fell asleep in the back of my truck with sawdust in his hair and the man who thought love was a hose he could attach to my house. I visit him when the state allows, and I do not bring money. I bring books with margins I have written in as if he could learn to read my older self and pick a better story. If you are reading to solve a riddle quickly, I apologize. The detective work that saved me was not about clever leaps, it was about dignifying small facts and trusting the way they stand when you try to shove them over. The threat was not a monster under the bed. It was a patient hand on a latch. And because you asked to search with me, here are the parts you might have circled if you had been at my table: a second inhaler that felt like a lie told in plastic, a garage that smelled like cinnamon in the wrong season, a latch that learned a new trick without my permission, a pot of kindness that did not taste right even before it needed tasting, payments to a company that sells dignity in envelopes, and a son who practiced explanations before he practiced apologies. One night in early September, after the last of the summer renters had driven past with their coolers and inflated pride, I stood on my porch with Sylvie. The motion light clicked on. A shape slid out of the hedges at the edge of the step. My breath stopped solid in my chest and then thawed slowly when the shape turned its head. A fox. Red as an afterthought. It paused, measured us, decided we were furniture, and went about its business. I laughed. Everything is exactly as it appears, I said, and for the first time in a year, I meant it. Not everything, Sylvie said, and kissed the side of my face in a way that rewired the house. Inside, the stove ticked as it cooled, the clocks did not agree, and nothing in the freezer surprised me. We turned off the porch light. The lake kept breathing, as it always does when it knows you are finally listening. There is a half-millimeter shift in my garage doorframe where a latch was taught to misremember. I have not fixed it. It is my scar. When I run my thumb over that tiny imperfection, I think of the way truth feels when you test it with the weight of your life, solid, inevitable, quiet. If anything in your own house ends up where it should not be, an inhaler in a freezer, a medicine bottle moved 3 inches left, an apology that arrives too early, write it down. Do not argue with yourself about whether you are making a fuss. Fusses built the bridges you drive without thinking. Tell someone whose hands can hear. Choose truth over the kindest lie. And do not eat chili a man leaves on your table who has never learned how water behaves at a boil. I am Ezra. I am 70. I married a woman with a river in her hair who can coax time back into old machines. The grandchildren know how to set the table and how to ask questions that pull laughter out of me on purpose. The ledger lives in a drawer with the good scissors. On the mantel sits the little maple box that carried our rings and now holds the cards that matter, the bank, the lawyer, the sheriff, and the number for a shop on Maple Street where a woman will lean over your broken thing and listen until it tells her how to begin. We are all either detectives or the reason detectives have work. The difference is a pencil, a friend, and the stubbornness to test a story before you put your weight on it. Step down slowly. If it holds, keep going. If it does not, turn on the light. Make a new rule. Keep your house. And when a gift shows up smelling like cinnamon in the wrong room, smile with the kind of smile that has already opened a window. Breathe. Live. You will know exactly what to do when the motion light comes on.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.